This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. The book is The Drowning Game. The author is Barbara Nickless. Sisters Nadia and Cass Brenner are heirs to Ocean House, a decades-old empire that builds super yachts for the rich and powerful, emirs, oligarchs, and titans of industry throughout America and Europe. They're a next-generation success with the design of their soon-to-be commissioned mega yacht for a Chinese billionaire. But the sisters' entree into the coveted Asian market is tragically cut short when Cass falls from a 40th floor hotel balcony. A Singapore detective rules suicide. Nadia has been in the yacht business too long not to be suspicious, especially when she discovers Cass's involvement in dangerously illicit activities. Pulled into the same web of betrayal, lies, and secrets that trapped her sister, Nadia is on the most perilous mission of her life because uncovering the truth behind her sister's death could tear the Brenner family apart, and it just might get her killed. From Seattle to Austria to the South China Sea, Nadia must hold on to the one thing that can keep her safe. It's the Brenner family motto: trust no one. Barbara Nickless is the Wall Street Journal and Amazon Charts bestselling author of Play of Shadows, Dark of Night, and At First Light in the Dr. Evan Wilding series, as well as the Sidney Rose Parnell series, which includes Blood on the Tracks, a Suspense magazine best of 2016 selection and winner of the Colorado Book Award and the Daphne du Maurier Award for Excellence. Her essays and short stories have appeared in Writer's Digest and on Criminal Element, among other markets. Makes her home in beautiful Colorado, where she loves to cave, snowshoe, hike, and drink single malt scotch, usually not at the same time. Happy to have, for the very first time, Barbara Nickless join me here on Speaking of Writers. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you for being here. The Drowning Game, where did the idea for this one come from?
I've always wanted to write espionage, and I was thinking about a story, and then I read an article in the New Yorker by Evan Osmos called The Haves and the Have Yachts.
Hmm.
And it opened up this entire world. I mean, we see a lot about billionaires, but this opened up the highest echelon of that and the world that these people live in. And I thought, man, I got to go poking around that. That sounds like so much fun. And it was.
The characters. How did you create these characters? Let's start with Nadia.
Sure. I've always wanted a sister, so I think I decided pretty quickly I was going to have sisters. Um, and the whole creation of characters it's such an interesting act. I used to try and fill out those forms. What's your character's favorite color and what's their favorite movie? And um, that that does not work for me. I would get so bored so quickly trying to do that. So now it's more like I just kind of sit and wait and let them start talking to me and making themselves known. So it feels a little mystical, but I'm sure what I'm doing is pulling from people I actually know or other books that I read and sort of creating this composite character.
Did Nadia come to you first, or Cass, or someone else?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh gosh, it was probably Nadia, even though the book opens with Cass. Cass is the character that I would like to be, and Nadia is much more like me. So Nadia is pretty timid. She's not thrilled about this world she suddenly gets thrust into, whereas Cass, although she's not as brave as she pretends to be, is determined to do the right thing, regardless of personal cost. So she's the she's the person we need more of in this world. I think Nadia is more like the rest of us.
Hmm.
Like, no, no, I'm just going to run home and hide under my bed till it all blows over.
The locations are all over the world: Seattle to Austria to the South China Sea. Why all of these locations?
First of all, with Monaco, which is one of the settings there, that's one of the big yacht places. I did not go to Monaco because it wasn't in the travel budget, but I did watch videos from the super yacht show there. It's kind of the biggest show of the year. But the whole angle towards China and having it set in Singapore was because looking at the yacht world, I didn't want to deal with Russian oligarchs. We've been hearing about them a lot. and about how their yachts have been compounded. So I wanted something different. And Asia's got a huge market coming up with these ultra high net worth individuals who would be in the market, believably, for a yacht. Singapore has the shipyards where they build super yachts. And there's a lot of interesting stuff going on between China and the US and the South China Sea. China's trying to expand its territory there. It's trying to lay claim to what they call the Nine Dash Line, which people might remember caused quite a furor with the Barbie movie, because China said they saw the Nine Dash Line in there, and it wasn't that at all, but the movie makers had to take it out. And we have an agreement with the Philippines to protect them. So it's not inconceivable that World War III could start there as China tries to increase its presence there. So it just seemed right for an espionage novel.
As part of your research, you just mentioned you watch videos on yachts, and the article inspired it a bit. The book that you read in the New Yorker. Um, what other types of research did you do on yachts for this book and the yacht industry?
So I worked with a gentleman based in Fort Lauderdale who helped me a lot with the whole. He works for a company that builds super yachts. So he vetted a lot of my information. He read my book for me to make sure it was accurate. I had a tome that had come out just before I started my book. So it was like a sign
Hmm.
on the entire super yacht industry from conception in the billionaire's eye or the millionaire's eye to the completion of the product, completion of the ship, and then supporting it thereafter. So that provided me with invaluable information. And then I also worked with a gentleman out of California who runs protection for super yachts. So I could say, what would my guy want on his super yacht if he was worried about being attacked by pirates or perhaps by a foreign government? What would he need to have on board?
Hmm. You definitely see some of the super yachts this time of year, especially down in Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach. I used to
Yeah.
live and work down there, and also I worked up in the Hamptons on Long Island, and in the summer, of course,
Uh,
you see all of them up there. So they're up there, and then they're in Florida as well. Those super yachts.
Yeah, there and around the Mediterranean. I was in
Hmm.
Turkey, and we were on a boat, a gullet in the Mediterranean Ocean, and one of these super yachts came up. I looked it up. It had been chartered. Uh, they were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per day for the super yacht. It was complete with the helicopter. Like, I kind of wanted to swim over there and say, "Hey, I've written this book. Can I just come on board, have a poke around?" But
So
common sense prevailed.
yes. So Barbara, what's the story behind you becoming a writer?
I had wanted to be a writer as far as I can remember. And I was 3. I was in the hospital for the first of what would become many eye surgeries. And I told my mom I wanted to be a writer. And I was getting good get well cards, and I would turn them over to the backs, which were blank. And I would imitate my mom's handwriting, and then make up a story to go with my gibberish. And that's when I told her I'm going to be a writer. And she was an English lit teacher, so that worked really well for her. She really encouraged me in that in lots of wonderful ways.
So it was in the
Um,
DNA, clearly.
I think it was in the DNA, but I will say it took me a long time to get around to it. I wrote a couple of really atrocious stories when I was younger. And then in college, I wrote a fantasy novel as an independent study project to look at medieval society. Um, and then I went off and did a whole lot of other stuff before I finally got serious about it after we lost our home in a wildfire, the 2012 Waldo Canyon
Mm.
wildfire. And that was kind of the point at which I said, life's happening faster than I would like it to. And if I'm going to get this done, I really need to focus. And I did. And wrote Blood on the Tracks at that point while trying to rebuild our lives, essentially.
Mm. Did you always know that you were a pretty good storyteller?
You broke up there. I'm sorry.
Did you always know that you were a pretty good storyteller?
I didn't even have a concept of that. I just knew I loved stories and I wanted to read stories and I wanted to tell stories. Um, and gosh, my mom let me read the comic books. If I was reading, she didn't care what it was, cereal boxes, um, and these comic books from Ripley's Believe It or Not and Boris Karloff, Tales from the Crypt, and all of those to the Junior Classics Illustrated comic books. So stories were just a part of my life from the get-go, and I still love to read.
Do you use an outline or are you a pantser?
Yes. So having a deadline, I and being sort of a having a bit of OCD tendencies. I like things very neat and orderly and organized, including my thoughts. Um, I've really tried to outline, and I'm miserable at it.
Mm.
So I'll spend a lot of time outlining and then write a bunch of pages that don't go anywhere. So it's really kind of been a mix. My current book, the one I'm working on now, I've got the tightest deadline I've ever had, and I am totally pantsing it. So I've spent some time doing some research and just kind of letting ideas compost and let the characters start to come to life. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see if I make my deadline.
You said you're organized and you're under deadline now. Are you a disciplined writer that writes at a certain time each day?
I try. My schedule's pretty erratic, but I do make sure I write 5 days a week, and then I tend to do research at night and on the weekends. But I definitely, it's button chair, can't wait for the muse, and the act of writing in and of itself is will generate things when you sit down and you don't have much going on in your head in terms of where the story is going to go. As soon as you start writing, things start happening. And I've learned this. I teach creative writing to veterans, and as part of a healing process, and it's the same thing for them. They'll sit down. I've got nothing. I got nothing, and then they start, and then the words start to come. So it's fascinating. It's almost as if we were, you know, whatever outlet this provides for us. I don't know evolutionarily why that would make any sense, but we do seem to be hardwired for story.
Barbara, what do you think makes a good story?
First of all, great characters. I can be happy with a slow moving or slow burn story if I'm intrigued by the characters. Um, a setting that comes to life. I obviously I write in a genre where plot is important. That was always of least importance to me. And in fact, that's why I started writing mysteries because I had all these ideas for characters and these settings I was interested in, and I needed some bones, a skeleton to go along with this. And I thought, well, if we have a dead body or 3 or 5, then we have a story because people have to do something about it. But I will continue to come back to the idea of characters.
Does writing
And
energize you or exhaust you?
oh, that's another yes question, both. Writing makes me happier than anything, but it's also such a great struggle. So you can have a wonderful day, everything comes together, and then you're just like, I've got the best job in the world. And then the next day, you read what you wrote, and it's wretched. What am I kidding? Who am I kidding? I can't do this. I can't write. I'm the worst writer in the world, and I still have to do 1,800 words today. And oh my gosh, I'm gonna just go be a nuclear physicist or something really easy.
Have you gone back to some of your earlier works and reread them?
So going back to the Waldo Canyon fire of 2012, I don't have my earlier
Mm.
works, unfortunately. So only stuff that was digitized. I don't have anything from college or earlier that I can go back on. And I don't reread my current books, even when I probably should, just to know what the characters were doing and make sure I've got somebody's eye color right. But it's such a cringeful. That's not a word, but that's the process. I just, oh my gosh, I could have said it this way. I could have written it that way. So long answer short, no.
Barbara, you mentioned earlier you love reading. What genres do you especially enjoy reading, and what are the ones that you tend to avoid?
I'm pretty much an omnivore. So I love obviously mystery thriller. I write in that genre, but I love mainstream novels. I love women's fiction. I love science fiction. Used to read a lot of fantasy, less of that, more, less of that these days. I I don't read romance, and I'm not sure why. I used to. Um, Back in high school, I had to hide the books from my mom. Maybe that's why I don't read romance now. I hear my mom's voice saying, "Oh, come on, you need to read Thomas Hardy or Charles Dickens. What are you doing?" But really, I love it all across the board.
Are you hard at work on the next Barbara Nicholas novel? And if so, can you give us a sneak peek into what it's about?
I am. This is the one with that super tight deadline.
Mm,
So I had that one off on the espionage, and now I'm back to my serial killer roots
mm.
and back to Denver. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited about it. I think I have a fun premise to play with.
Where'd the title for this one come from? Not to give too much away.
For the drowning game,
Yeah.
that was a marketing effort. So the working title for that book was simply White Boats, because that's what those in the yacht industry call super yachts and mega yachts and giga yachts, call them white boats. You don't brag about your yacht, you just have a boat. So that was the working title. Clearly not a great title. So then we had to brainstorm a lot with marketing. They came up with the drowning game, and then I had to go back and add a drowning game to the book because there was no mention of drowning in the book. So that was an interesting process. I've never had to alter the book to fit a title, but I love the title. I think it's fun, and I think the book came out better for having that little game added to it.
The book is The Drowning Game. The author is Barbara Nicholas. She has a website, barbaranickless.com. Also on Instagram at barbara.nicholas, and it's Nickles, and Twitter or X at Barbara Nicholas. And thank you for joining me.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And by the way, if your independent bookstore does not have this book, ask them to get it and order it. The Drowning Game from Barbara Nicholas. And if you like this podcast, go ahead and hit the subscribe button too. I'm Steve Richards, and this is the Speaking of Writers podcast.